And welcome to the Startup Innovators podcast. And I am super excited today. Selfishly, I must say, because if you like science fiction like I do, my entire life, watched every Star Trek movie, was an actual Trekkie, met Gene Roddenberry, love Isaac Asimov, um, all the kind of fun movies that are out today about the future and AI. You're going to love this because we're going to be talking about AI on the edge and what seems like science fiction, but where we are on the cusp of that becoming reality. And today's guest is Bryant Cruse, who's the founder of New Sapiens, which is an ambitious AI company that's pushing beyond today's generative models to what he's calling synthetic intelligence. Now, just hearing that got me pretty excited, which, as I interpret, is a system that's built on curated, structured human knowledge, which is very different today than the traditional LLM models, which are really predictive models. They're looking at language and characters and trying to make a very sophisticated, powerful prediction of what they think the answer should be, which it really isn't the way human beings operate. We're very contextual, much more so than predicting character strings and that nature. And that has a lot of implications on where AGI is going, robotics, droids, all these cool things that we've dreamed about and seen in science fiction movies. And I think you're working on making that a reality. Ryan's background is really kind of straight out of a sci-fi origin story. I mean, he was a naval aviator, worked on the Hubble space systems as an engineer. He was a serial entrepreneur that applied AI to spacecraft operations. And he's built and exited two companies that were space tech companies, Tellurian and Altair Aerospace. And now he's got his eyes on that far bigger prize, which is machine intelligence that grounded in real human knowledge. Before we get into this, there is something on your website that I read that I want to talk about this quote real quickly. It says, "We," and I'm implying as Homo sapiens in parentheses for myself, "we can alter our environment because we have knowledge of the natural world. As knowledge increases, so does our control." And so, what are the implications, therefore, if machines are able to gain that same type of true knowledge? What and whom ends up gaining the control over our world? And that's just going to be a kind of something we're going to throw out for maybe a discussion that
Sure.
interests me personally.
Of course. Me too.
That's great. So I think the best way to start, because your background is so fascinating, is just maybe a quick 2-minute walk through your own origin story from a naval aviator all the way through the various space systems companies to today.
Okay. Well, you really have to start even before the naval aviator part, because one of the interesting things about me, and by the way, I resonated immediately with you when you talked about science fiction. Maybe one of the seminal things in my life was when I was 5 years old, my dad took me to see a movie in the movie theaters called Forbidden Planet, where we had Robert the robot, who was the first credible, in science fiction, vision of a robot that truly was intelligent, and that really stuck with me. And it's funny because as I went on to my career, it turns out that space and AI were interwoven. But before I became a naval aviator, I went to a school here in Annapolis, St. John's College, where we studied the Western canon, the 100 great books of Western civilization. And we read Plato, Aristotle, you go through Kant, Hume, all the people who had really interesting things to say about how do we know what we know, and what's the relationship between our ideas of the world and the world itself. Another way, what is knowledge? What is knowledge? So, but I didn't go into academia at that. I actually formulated an original theory about that knowledge is a model, and models aren't really true or false. They're just more or less useful. The best models we have today are like scientific theories, like atomic theory, but we don't say it's true, do we? We just say
It's a
it's a theory,
theory.
but it's a good one because it works. So that's kind of like, for me, I left with the feeling that if you want to understand knowledge, you have to understand models. But anyway, I didn't become an academic. I went in the Navy and flew C-130s for about eight or 9 years. But I wanted to get into space, so I got active duty, stayed in the reserves, and got a master's in space systems engineering. And within a year or two, found myself working on the Hubble Space Telescope. And here's the interesting thing. That's where I got into AI almost right away. In those days, AI was something different. It was than it is today. It was expert systems. But I went into the Hubble Control Center on the mission operations contract, and I saw the way they were operating it. And it was all these people, well, we had about 8 different mission specialists in the control center, in the mission control for Hubble. Hubble hadn't even launched yet, by the way. We were getting ready to launch it and writing the procedures and the things. But the way you looked at the way you flew the spacecraft, from my perspective as a pilot, we were looking at these computer displays of tables of numbers. I mean, like here's 10 numbers that way and 20 down, and each number had a little mnemonic beside it, something like CBAT, BLTS. And you were supposed to know that that meant battery 6 voltage. And then the number 28.2, 28.1, 28.3. And I thought, oh my God, there's 4,000 pieces of telemetry coming up from Hubble on the engineering stream. What if I had to fly my C-130 with tables of numbers? We'd be in the drink in no time. You
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And at that moment, I kind of got this inspiration or this mission. I wanted to revolutionize the way we operated spacecraft. I wanted to make spacecraft operations not be a science project. I mean, it started out as a science project, but now now it's like 1982. We ought to be doing this more like an aircraft. Much more refined. So how do you do that? Well, I know what those numbers meant, but humans aren't good at keeping up with the numbers. That's not the skill that we have. We have the knowledge, but we have to be able to relate that knowledge to the real-time reality. So I saw the thing we had to do was get my knowledge, or expert space engineers' knowledge, somehow into a computer. And the technology of the day was expert systems. I was a little skeptical about if I thought that was really knowledge or really AI. It really to me, it was kind of like one kind of data into another kind of data, because there wasn't an underlying structural model in there. It's just if then, if then, if then. But you could do it. And I built, as far as we know, the first AI application to spacecraft operations for Hubble. And on the basis of that, NASA thought that was cool, and they sent me out to get equivalent to a master's in AI out of Palo Alto at the Lockheed AI Center. The big tech companies in those days were aerospace companies.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but they still were all on the AI bandwagon at that time. So
I've been there. Local out here in San Francisco. It's
uh,
amazing.
it's
Yeah.
up on Angel Road. It was great. Great 6-month residency. But while I was there, I got some of the local engineers that we need to build a shell or a platform for expert systems that could keep up with real-time telemetry. And so we did. And that, long story short, ended up jumping out of Lockheed, taking that technology with us after a lot of lawyering, and it started a company. But after about 2 years of that, it was kind of clear one thing. First of all, we weren't going to make a lot of money selling services to the government. Secondly, for systems weren't scaling that well. So I bailed from that one, reset myself, reset my ideas about AI, and started another company. And there we become something that was really amazing. And basically, we were trying to bring structure. How do we get our knowledge out of our heads, curated from our heads, into software? And we were doing a diagram on the board one day, and they said, "Look, we have the system, say top level system, counter launch vehicle, subsystem, propulsion, guidance, GNC, whatever, and then so on, so on, down all the way down to the lowest level components, which had instrumentation points on them, you know, like battery voltage." Uh, But what you really wanted to know was states. So you wanted to map the telemetry signatures at the lowest level and the components into systems, subsystem states, into parent states, all the way up to the top. And one of our software engineers was looking at that as, the space systems engineer was drawing out the knowledge. And he said, it looks like it's software object structure. Object-oriented programming was just coming in. And it was like,
Yeah.
so we figured out, we created a markup language for the engineer to just write down your vehicle, specify it as a finite state machine. They could do that easily because they already thought about it that way. So that wasn't a big translation for them. No programming required. No shifting of paradigm like in the rules or anything. Just think, keep in your head about the space. If you have systems and states, write them down with a markup language. We wrote a compiler, tried to do an object system, put real-time telemetry at the bottom of that object system, and the states bubbled up in the top. And you map those states into nice, beautiful glass cockpit displays. And it was amazing. And that was
Wow.
exactly what I had been, aiming for all the time. And we did it. And we went on to build the launch control system for Conestoga, and
Wow.
like a launch control system or satellite control system for a small constellation of satellites. And they were
That's
the most
incredible.
automated systems ever made. And not only
Wait,
that,
I was gonna say, today everybody knows, of Tesla and SpaceX and all these kind of AI companies that are doing things, Jeff Bezos. But back then, I mean, when I grew up as a kid, everything was NASA. And when I was young, if you asked someone, a male, what they wanted to be, one day when they grew up, chances are they would say an astronaut. And
I
it's so
felt the same thing.
fascinating to be there, yeah, in that early period where we really did. We went to the moon multiple times. We had big ambitious plans at the government level. Very exciting.
Well, that's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
I grew up, I remember Sputnik, I remember Explorer Alive. I mean, I was a kid, but I remembered those and how upset everybody was. And all of a sudden, and this is the funny thing, Forbidden Planet, the beginning of the movie, they said, yes, mankind will first reach the moon in the 22nd century. You know, 3 years later, they started the Apollo program, and 8 years later, we were there. And that
Yeah.
became, in my generation, the point of reference of progress into space. You drew a line between those two dots, and what do you get? You get 2001. By
Yeah. Yeah.
2001, we expected to be in those big space stations and moon colonies, and we really thought we would be, and we would have been if we had maintained that same accelerated pace. So that's
Yeah.
really interesting.
Yeah. So you went on to build these different companies and sell them. Um, let's move to where we are today with New Sapiens. And I think the best way to understand this is just to start with the name itself in context. Obviously, it's a reference to Homo sapiens and kind of a new form of human-like intelligence. Love to get the backstory on that, a little bit about the company, what's new, what's different, and where you see this going.
Well, an old CFO of one of my previous companies, I was saying, I got another company, I'm trying to name it. He said, name it what you want it to be, but what it is you're trying to build. And of course, sapiens, we are Homo sapiens, wise hominins, you
Yes.
know, and, but more specifically, sapiens, you know, uh, in our model corresponds to the intellect. So we want to build an artificial intellect, except that the approach we ended up taking was 180 degrees contrarian to the entire tradition of AI, going all the way back to 1956 Dartmouth conference on where the term AI was um, uh, coined. But in the call for the papers or the call for the conference, they said, this is artificial intelligence based on our conjecture that there's no feature of human intelligence that can't be simulated in a computer. So they should have called it imitative intelligence because they were trying to imitate human intelligence. But, so they went off very optimistic and they thought to get the whole thing done by the end of the summer. Well, it didn't happen. And they had one type of, one approach after the other, expert systems that didn't work out. But they kept, you know, going down that road. The problem uh, if you're imitating something is you might come up with something which is a good imitation of it, but isn't the thing
Hmm.
that you were trying to create. There was and I didn't find out about this guy till a lot later, but in the 80s, I think John Hoagland, who's a philosopher, said, well, maybe we're going about this AI thing all wrong. Maybe uh, it should be not artificial intelligence, but synthetic intelligence in the same sense that a synthetic diamond is a real diamond, but it isn't created by nature. So instead of trying to imitate human natural intelligence, maybe we should look for an engineering approach to get there, not the way nature did it, but in a better and more efficient and more cost effective way. And that's essentially what we did, because when we sat down and looked at AI from the like scientists and engineers. First thing, I'm at this time, I'm already 15 years into AI, or more 20 years already. And one thing that was real clear to me over the years is the AI community doesn't know what it's talking about. What do I mean by that? Well, because they don't define they don't define what intelligence is. They don't agree with what consciousness is. They don't agree with what it means to comprehend something. And they don't even agree what consciousness is or what the mind is. So we said, that's no good. Let's sit down and define it. So go back to Homo sapiens. It's what makes us different. And what's really different? Well, we say it's our intelligence. Well, what's intelligence? Well, intelligence is what gives us the ability to create knowledge of the world. And knowledge of the world is what allows us to control the world or to thrive in it. I mean, the bottom line is we're the only species that can adapt our environment to fit our needs, whether us have to adapt to it or die.
Yeah,
And that's
for sure.
knowledge. So the real key here, so intelligence then is some kind of information processing, which could be in a organic brain or, or or digital computer, which is an information processor. But in either case, it would only be intelligent if it produced knowledge. And that knowledge would have to be a model of the world. And so we looked at not at the brain, not at intelligence, not at algorithms, because first, let's see if we knew what knowledge is. If we can build the knowledge and synthesize the knowledge, then the algorithms get a lot simpler and easier to figure out because you're processing the information structure that you already really well understand. And
And
that's
very much a first principles approach to it.
totally first.
Completely. Yeah.
First, we got to build the science, you know, yeah, which we kind of did. Um, and yet, our definitions of those words are not far off the common usage definitions, nor would they shock people in generative AI that just have a very different notion of how you get there than we do. But if you're going to go straight to knowledge, well, what kind of skill and background do you need to understand that? Not computer science. That's not going to help you one little bit. They don't teach. Yet it's epistemology. It's
Yeah.
philosophy.
Philosophy.
It's the
Yeah.
kind of stuff I studied in undergraduate school and already had some pretty advanced designs, pretty advanced notions about what it means to have a model and whether models are really, structure or symbols. And, we figured all that stuff out. So we were able to then say, well, knowledge must have a hidden structure, just the way material things have hidden structures. Democritus conjectured if you keep breaking apart objects in smaller and smaller pieces, eventually you get to ones that are too small to break apart anymore. And they're like the material atoms. And it took then another 2,000 years to figure out which were the material atoms and which things were atomic and which things were composite and the rules of their combination with the periodic table of the elements. So we did the same thing with ideas and we broke them down and broke them down until we got to the atoms of cognition, the fundamental building blocks of ideas. And we categorized them and classified them into something which would be the scientific equivalent for knowledge of what the periodic table of the elements is for the material world. And in fact, our structures by which we model things, we capture information and we put them in these structures. We use a directed graph structure, not a semantic network, not a directed graph structure. It's not semantics, not symbolic. Very, very compact. In fact, if you look at the structure with these nodes and elements, nodes and edges or nodes and connectors, it looks like chemistry. It looks like the models we make of chemical. And of course,
Now the
yeah,
the other AI companies, I don't believe are doing it this way, which is interesting because whenever you see, someone who's very famous talking about it, and they're talking about the future implications of AI, and you can take it out to the whole, people always talk about, dystopian Terminator, like, a world. How are we going to manage this? Um, it's almost like that problem needed to be addressed before the technology was even invented, which is what you're saying from a first principles basis. Before we start to develop the technology or try to adapt it backwards later on, right? Where it's trying to grasp these fundamental truths about who we are as human beings, how we operate together, what we believe about the world, the future, God, etc. They didn't start that way. And
well,
so now how,
yeah.
people talk about where are we going? Are the machines going to take over? What will be their personal morality and what's the source of that? Everybody's asking the questions because they never started with that.
They should have started with that. That's true. But
Right,
they also
right.
started with what intelligence itself is. We're tool builders, we're human beings. Intelligence gives us the ability to knowledge, and that gives us the ability to make tools. And we build tools to enhance our natural features and natural abilities. So what are we trying to do here? Well, which feature, which ability? Well, it's our sapience. It's our intelligence that we want to amplify to get better knowledge that is more consistent, is more powerful, better models of the world. So that's what it is. But the other side of the coin is, okay, so we do that, but you can't answer these kind of questions about salvation or doom, from AI, unless you already know how you're going to get there. And the assumption has been in the current discourse about AI, no matter what the question about AI is you assume it's going to be an LLM. I guess that's what everybody's been told. It's going to be an LLM. And, we've had it pounded into our head for the past couple of years now. And, frankly, chatbots are amazingly compelling. They sure look They sure look intelligent. They sound intelligent. I can understand what they say, but that's partly more about human psychology. Theory of mind kicks in and says, oh, it's talking to me. There must be a mind in there. It's really visceral that you feel that way. But in fact, it's an illusion. It's a parrot. And, you can do stage magic and make the lady disappear really well. And everybody gasps and jumps out of their seat to run to the stage and save the poor woman. But you didn't really get closer to teleportation. She didn't really go anywhere, folks. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what chatbots are. And so, but here's the thing, and a lot of people still believe it, even today. You know, it, it, some of the founders, not to pick on him, but Ilya Savetsky, super intelligence, his new startup, honestly believes that if you can sequence the word correctly, you are building a world model beneath it. And
Yeah.
that's magical thinking. Most, but meanwhile, the narrative that if you just keep scaling up bigger and bigger language models, you can get to AGI or get to any kind of intelligence, really,
Yeah.
is pretty much shattered. I mean, GPT-5 just kind of shattered that
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it was 500 times bigger in terms of its data set than 4, but it wasn't noticeably better at all.
Well, I
500.
always think of the analogy, and maybe I love Black Mirror, and there's even an episode back to the 1960s original Star Trek. But this concept of can you export consciousness, from an individual person to a machine, and then have that person as a sole being move forward. And I think we all intuitively know if we had a machine and it studied everything about us, all our history, all our emotions, our actions, everything, it still would not be that person's spirit moving forward. Like, we
I
all as human
agree with
beings
that.
know that.
Well, sir, I agree with that because we're not just an intellect. And furthermore, we have the mind. You might say we have the heart, but where all that lives, whether it's all psychology and all it's the brain structure, or it's you know multidimensional or supernatural. We're agnostic about that physics. Okay,
Yeah.
we're scientists, we're engineers. We're looking at building a structure that's going to have the same phenomena, but we're only building the intellect part. We're not trying to construct an artificial heart in these things. Okay, because if we did, and they had what it would appear to us to be emotions, and they would build moral values on that, we would have to give them rights. That's not the point here. We don't need to build artificial people. Now, as far as, and I've always wondered about um, the experience which makes us human, which is the heart and the mind, but which I think you probably do need a neural network to do that. You look at
Yeah.
the way emotions flow and interact, and it's like wave functions. But I think it would be hard to build such a thing as that in a straightforward digital computer with linear architecture. But anyway, it's not the point. The real point for us, and for all of us, I think today, and where we want to go with this stuff is, you know, first of all, will it become superhuman in its abilities? But second of all, will it still be safe?
Mhm.
We've thought a lot about why very smart people like Steve Hawkins and Elon Musk and others have come out and said, this is dangerous. You know, you know, Hawkins came out and said, humans won't be able to keep up, with AIs. They were better AIs and better AIs, and they will supersede us. There's two fundamental, I think, flaws in that reasoning. The first comes from the assumption that it's going to be some kind of stochastic, maybe neural network based thing. Well, we don't know how those algorithms work when you get them running. Okay. And you don't know what goes on inside of them. And that's why Ilya can imagine that they're creating world models, even though there's no way, because you don't know what's going on inside. You can't see what's going on inside. And they're
Right.
stochastic, which means you can't guarantee the same results from the same inputs. So that means that you always have a degree of uncertainty that so you don't really know how it works. And so you can't really control how it works. You may be able to build more and more powerful, more and more sophisticated processing algorithms and pattern matches and things like that, but you're really not in control. Just like you see with our chatbots out there, they're always getting out of control of their desires. So,
Right.
if you say, okay, that's what it is, and that's the kind of technology that it is, and now I'm going to amplify it arbitrarily high, where you can't really, there's no such thing as infinite intelligence because intelligence is built on top of knowledge. But, but nonetheless, that's the thought. Well, you wouldn't trust it because you wouldn't know how it worked. So
Yeah.
that's one
Yeah.
thing. The second thing is, again, anthropomorphism. This is something that AI, in all my time, all my decades in the AI, see again and again. The researchers and thinkers mistake the experience of being an intelligent being for intelligence. And they think that what I experience and how I feel being an intelligent being must be part and parcel to what intelligence is. And the mistake they make is that humans evolved our intelligence to build models to make the world adapt to us. But that wouldn't have been any good if we didn't develop concurrently with that the motivation to go out and do just that. So we're motivated to change things up. We're motivated to use our intelligence to change the world. And so people like Hawkins and all those folks naturally assume a superintelligence is going to use its intelligence to do stuff and change the world, and we won't understand its reasoning, and we won't understand, and we're not in control of it, especially when they start building themselves. And so it's a legitimate fear from those standpoints. But, and that's where it gets back to these fundamental things. If you're going to ask a question about the long-term effects of AI or the short-term effects of AI, what kind of AI? See, what we're doing by building the structure and curating the basic model of a world from human minds. First of all, it's a human-centric model. The thinks its view of the world is a human one to begin with. So it's going to be commensurable. But the other thing, because we can do that, then the logic, the processing software is not stochastic, it's deterministic. In other words, it'll do exactly what we tell it to do. And if we say, dear robots, you're programmed to be very helpful to human beings, and you can do this and you can not do that. Do not be programmed yourself to want to change the world on your own. You're programmed to want to help change the world only as we specify, with your advice, of course. You know, so such a thing as that isn't going to be a threat to humanity unless we do something stupid in the programming.
Right.
And that brings us, back to as the guys must feel laws of robotics.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Now we have rewritten them because we think they have some serious feelings. But our sapiens, as we call them, will be governed by certain inhibitions. And that's another thing, maybe my impression from Forbidden Planet and Robbie the robot. I was delighted to see that Robbie appeared to have his three laws built in, because at one point the mad scientist prototype Dr. Morbius orders to demonstrate its things, orders Robbie to put the protagonist blaster in its head, and then Morbius says fire, and robot, he had a transparent head, with like a telltale inside. He literally shorts out, electrically shorts out. He can't harm life because he's programmed not to. So
Yeah.
from our standpoint, that are super AI is going to take over the world and make us irrelevant? Absolutely not. I am not a bit of worry about
Well, that's very positive thinking. I'm glad to
that.
hear that. So,
Rest your
so,
head
well,
easy.
I think, as I talk to so many people out there, obviously I live in the Silicon Valley, so I'm a little bit in a bubble because people are more aware of these things, and the field that I'm in is like that. When I talk to people abroad, I'm originally a Midwesterner. I talk to people in different parts of the world. A lot of people's view on where this is going is so often based on movies, and so much of the movies that come out today, whether it's Maze Runner and Hunger Games, and you name it, it's of a dystopian future. And when I think of like the original Star Trek series, and Gene Roddenberry, it was a very positive story about the future of humanity. So it's great to talk to someone who does believe in this incredible positive future, not just in terms of productivity and advances AI are going to take us to that next level of exploration, but bringing those positive human values forward and having that be the first principle of all this technology. So let's talk specifics. Like, who are your clients? Who are you targeting as business partners? And where do you see this going in the next couple of years in terms of the company itself?
Well, that's a huge story too, because when you think about it, what we have created isn't a product. I mean, you typically talk to investors, what's your product, what problem you're solving, what's your product, what's your market. This
Yeah,
is a technology. It's not a product initially. And it's like the steam engine in 1800. It led to it, there are many, many different products. It disrupted many, many industries. And
right.
so this is really a new way of programming computers by endowing those computers with knowledge, originally, from human minds, but they'll be able to refine it, extend it, amplify it over time as they get more, you know, m- um, with successive updates and better algorithms that we will build for them. They'll get more and more. AIQ will go up and their education will go up, you know, really without limit, but not without limit, but until we get everything and all the knowledge in the library, all the language in the Library of Congress turned into knowledge and synthesized in Sapiens form. You always make that distinction. So, but that process itself, we talk about, well, you could go to your Sapiens and say, you know, invent a, invent a model for a unified field theory of physics, but I want one that faster of light travel is faster. Could you do that? And I said, well, I'll get that right on it. And knowing that it's not only quantum physicists, a atomic physicist and an astrophysicist, but every kind of physicist, all at once, all at the same time, plus everything else you imagine, all in one mind, which has no limit, never forgets anything. If the problem space gets too big, you can add more CPUs. So
Right.
you could solve those kind of problems. And that's one vision that people have for the wonderful things that super intelligence, benign superhuman intelligence like ours, could do. And that's not wrong at all. But we become to realize that just along the way of curating knowledge for these things, our own knowledge is going to get better.
Yeah.
They say the best way to learn is to teach, but in this case, it's really much more precise because we get all these teachers with all their best knowledge, and but one perfect student, perfect memory, doesn't ever forget anything. So you have an opportunity now, but in the process of doing that, your own knowledge gets much more precise. And in the end, what you're doing is you're building an entity with unlimited intellect, with very, very again, perfect memory, no limitations. The internal model, it's the internal model that you're giving it. It's modeled the world where every idea in it is no ambiguity. Every model is absolutely precisely defined, absolutely precisely related to every other idea into one big structure. Okay, so that's really what we'd like ourselves to have. That's the model we want to have in our minds. But by building it for a machine, we'll understand better what that looks like. So we educate it. In the process, we become educated. And from a personal standpoint, we talk about the products, we need to get back to that. The personal standpoint, you'll have a sapiens, your personal sapiens, and that's the kind of model it'll have. And it'll be programmed to be your teacher and helper, okay, to help you live a better life by having a better knowledge of the world. So that alone, we think, is going to be revolutionary. Imagine the child gets their personal sapiens and a fuzzy toy, and it goes all the way through life with them,
Yeah.
becoming their
Yeah.
tutor, their guardian, their colleague. Takes over your company when when you want to retire, and delivers your eulogy. But imagine being able to talk to your great grandfather's sapiens, down the road and future generations. So that itself is like kind of a mind-boggling vision. But again, that's only one thing. That's like the ultimate personal secretary or the ultimate Siri, if you will. Then
Yeah.
we have all these other industries out there that are waiting. And if you look at that science, what do we have? Well, we have the ultimate automation technology that can really automate um, uh, what otherwise are, automation. Automation software today is very problematic. It's brittle. It's very expensive. Now they've tried to automate it with LLMs. Not working so well, in my opinion. You know, uh, we think we don't have any upper limit there. It'll
Yeah.
take a long time, but one market vertical at a time. And our idea is that we'll pick a market vertical like space, and say, okay, we're going to develop a space Sapiens. Think Hell 9000. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what I was thinking the whole time.
Exactly what we
2001 Space Odyssey. The
exactly
whole
what
time we've been
yeah.
talking about how.
But to do that, you got to bring in you have to have the space expertise. We already got some, but bring in more. We got the 2 astronauts on our board.
Oh, that's
Um,
amazing. That's great.
but also old friends of mine.
Yeah.
I served together in the Naval Space Command with them. But anyway, they're great people, brilliant. But anyway, we will go into that market vertical, but then we'll have hundreds of other market verticals. So the way to keep tight and the way to keep it clear is for each market vertical, we're going to basically establish a subsidiary company. So right now we're in the process, we think, of raising $5 to $10 million from high net worth individuals, maybe some different institutional investors. Not, mainstream investment in AI is all been chasing LLMs. So that's been a challenge
Well, in
for us.
traditional investing is show me your business plan, show me your 5-year plan to get 100 million in revenue and $1 billion
So
valuation.
they come in and say, okay,
Here's,
what do you have?
yeah,
You're an AI deal. And we say, well, first we have to teach you about a new science. And they say, well, sure, okay, fine. You got 20 minutes.
yeah,
Literally.
yeah, yeah.
So that hasn't worked out so well. But I think with the cracks showing in the current AI investment bubble and the productivity things not being there, the scalability argument being blown to smithereens, I think we're getting some real interest. So I think we're going to raise $5 to $10 million in the
Are
next.
are you actively doing that now, or is this something
Yeah.
you're planning on starting?
Oh no,
Okay.
we actually we have.
So so today, today, are you just a handful of people? I know you've got with some seed funding to go with
Yes.
this project.
Again, we
If
put
you rate,
$80 in both individuals and some crowdfunding. We're looking to raise basically another 5 to 10 million in the next 2 quarters because the vibes have
okay,
changed. We're starting to get more attention. And then after that, and we'll take that money and we'll go into 3 new lines of businesses. You have to come up with a demo. So we do space, we'll do a notion or at least a proof of concept PAL 9000. We may not have the real hardware behind it because it's expensive. Need the spacecraft partner for that. We want to do cybersecurity. In fact, we're already looking at a first contract to do cybersecurity, and it's a very interesting play um, in terms of AI. How does that fit into that? Well, our partner here has an unbreakable symmetric key that they've invented that not even quantum computers could crack, and they can deliver it to your device. But how do they know that you're in control of your device? Because the device has a Sapience on there, and you have a little conversation with the Sapience, and it knows things that only you could know. It gives you access.
wow, very very interesting.
Yeah.
Better than a retina scan or a
Yeah,
thumbprint.
better than biometrics click boot. I mean, one of the customers of our customer is a company that's building a digital wallet for crypto. If you know somebody's got $1 billion in crypto in their wallet, you can spend all the money you want to spoof their biometrics.
Yeah, yeah. I
So
was when you mentioned that. That's what the first thing came to my mind is security issues related to crypto. It's on
and,
everybody's mind.
and it's
The
real.
idea of a quantum computer breaking the code of, let's say, Bitcoin
Well, people are
or
terrified of it, rightly so. But the
yeah,
thing amusing it is, you log into your Sapiens and it says, you know, hey, haven't talked to you for a while. How's that poodle of yours that you like so much? And you say, I don't have a poodle. And you say, yeah, I knew that. But you're in. You know?
Well, that's a really interesting vertical because I mean, crypto's obvious because it involves personal money, but I believe personally that tokenization of everything is going to happen to some point and it's going
I
to be
think so
stored on the
too.
blockchain. I mean, from an investing standpoint, whether it's real estate or even private equity or
All the
venture.
problems we have today, you know.
Yeah.
Uh, the other line of business we want to go with that initial 10 million is customer service, but specifically, we're going to go after kind of the low-hanging fruit of auto attendants. Basically, those telephone answering menus you go through. Now that's a pain that people would like to be relieved of.
Yeah.
And again, your banking app is really a Sapiens. And
Yeah.
by the way, these things are so compact. They actually run on a phone.
Well, I love the fact that, you're looking at very specific commercial vertical applications, where you can have true partners to develop this early on, as opposed
Yes.
to the bigger vision's important. We're going to go to Mars. We're going to change the world. But the reality of getting technology off the floor, unless it's through, government interaction, government contracts, is commercial applications and ROI and traditional stuff. So it's nice to have that balance of, look, we're going to have very specific commercial applications that are going to drive cash flow and revenues, but we're not going to lose sight of the bigger picture as well, where this could go beyond that. And
Oh
that's
yeah.
a much longer ROI.
Well, but actually, it may be quicker than you think.
Mm,
Because if you
okay.
think about these lines of business, we don't think, you don't need hundreds, unless I had 10,000 people working on Alexa. And I don't want New Sapiens to grow to be a company of 100,000 employees. I want New Sapiens to be a fleet of 1,000 companies with 100 employees,
Yeah.
each one focused on their market verticals. So every time one of our divisions gets to be some number, they divide into two. But the other
Yeah.
thing, you can go and you can build up a startup factory for this technology. And so we're looking at hopefully next year, if we can prove our market in these three commercial, one plus the consumer Sapiens, we'll go out and raise $100 million or more, and we'll do 20 new startups, each one with 5 million seed capital. Go. And our
Uh,
technology.
the analogy is kind of floating in my head. I was thinking of, like, how cells in organisms split and become
Yeah,
more than
exactly.
one. Maybe then somehow synthetic intelligence combined with
You can
biological
go
morphism.
logarithmic.
I don't know. Yeah, it's really
Hey,
fascinating.
I'm glad you mentioned that because from a technical standpoint, um, there's always the issue of scalability. That's what sync expert systems, that's what's syncing connections to AI or LLMs. They level off and you get more and more effort, more and more money, more and more whatever you put into, and you get less and less performance. We have exactly the opposite curve. Why? Because building models is essentially putting together a jigsaw puzzle. You get all the pieces, you get them all sorted, and then you start putting them together into a model. Like a jigsaw puzzle is a model. A picture is a
Hmm.
model.
Sure.
And models are very compact ways of storing information. That's why we say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So we have this very compact way of storing information called models. And we start building models, whether it's the old general world model, common sense world model, or a model of a spacecraft, or any model you want. So you're putting the pieces together. But
Yeah.
if you look at the time of pieces placed over time, it's logarithmically in the right direction. It starts off real slow, and then it goes crazy right up the curve. You can see the whole picture because the number of pieces you're sorting goes down at the same time the places you can put them goes down. So it goes up. So, we're serious about talking about eventually getting, you know, all the knowledge that mankind has accumulated, in the last 6,000 years and getting it converted into a form that our sapiens can process.
Well, that is amazing. And I have loved this discussion. Obviously, it sounds like the most critical resource you're looking for right now or over the next year will be funding to the
Yes.
next level. So if anyone's hearing about this, whether you're an on the edge, forward thinking institutional investor, or you're someone that wants to invest as an individual in a company that is going to change the world in a new way, or in some ways, I think a lot of people who have children and grandchildren who love technology do wonder about that human aspect.
Well,
There's a
that
great
reached a
tech.
big term.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, the technologies come out there, with these, the platform engagement, device engagement algorithms track your attracts you and feed it back at you, causing the flips of phenomenon on devices. They're very concerning.
yeah.
Huh?
Oh, yeah. Definitely. And
Art, just all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So anyone that's looking to learn more about your company, learn about potentially investing, or just wants to kind of understand your perspective on the world and where things are going, what's the best way to reach out to you, Brian?
Well, you can go to our website, newsapiens.com. And if you're interested in being an investor, we have both a crowdfunding
Okay.
campaign going on, and we have an accredited investor funder. So if you want to invest more, go to the accredited investor side or contact us. You can
Okay.
contact our investor relations. It's just ir@newsapiens.com.
irnewsapiens.com.
Yeah, that
Terrific.
if you're interested in investing, but go to the website. I mean,
Yeah.
if the crowdfunding side, you could just do it all by yourself. But
The
you know,
website's really cool too. I have to say for anyone watching this that
thanks.
if you like science fiction, the website talks a lot about these pressing questions about the world. I even clicked and I had to read because Data was one of my favorite characters in the new Star Trek series that came out, the new old one, I guess these days. And I
Yes,
was thinking about that one, and then I saw the whole. There was a whole post on. I read all about that on Data. But it's an interesting, if you're interested in science fiction, where this is going, the website's kind of fun. It poses a lot of these deep intellectual human questions. So it's a cool place to go, even if you're just interested in where AI is going from a humanistic perspective.
yes.
So it's been,
But
yeah.
it's, you have to say what kind of AI, because the answers are different. And if you believe we're plausible and credible, we're going to be it because we think we have the key.
Well, that's amazing, and I really, it was a wonderful discussion, and I appreciate you. I appreciate you just for being the person that you are, trying to take it to the next level and having that deep concern. We talk about, well, no one wants to be in a dystopian Terminator era, right? But it's nice to actually have someone that is trying to prevent that from happening and doing it
Well,
from a first principle
I
standpoint.
think everybody in the company feels that way. And if you look at our board of directors, we're not young kids. We're all people who had successful companies and cashed out and could have been retired. But we believe in this. And we believe, and this is going to make a better world for our children and our grandchildren, and the world needs this. It really does need this because there's some things happening which aren't so great,
Yeah,
and some of
yeah.
them are being called AI.
Well, thank you so much, Bryant. The company is New Sapiens, and that's what it's all about, a new form of sapien. And I urge everybody to go check it out. Wonderful discussion. Thanks so much for
Thank you.
joining us today.
Thanks
Cheers.
thank you for
Thanks.
having me. It's been great.
You too. The Startup Innovators podcast is provided by MatchStar Venture Search. If you're interested in any of our executive roles or need help sourcing world-class talent for your company, check out our website at matchstar.com.